Join us on this Shabbat, wherever you are watching from. If you're watching on the Restoration app, shalomseattle.com, YouTube, Facebook, however you connect with us, we are glad you're here. We're starting a new series today called Inside and Outside, Congruence in the Life of Joseph. And Joseph is one of the sons of Jacob, as in Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And the story of Joseph is how the book of Genesis concludes. And it really goes from, well, he shows up in Genesis 30, but his story goes from Genesis 37 to the end of Genesis, and it coincides roughly with the Torah readings and the Torah portions that are set for this time of year in November and December. That the story of Joseph is going to take us to the end of this year, 2021. And I've been thinking about this word a lot. In fact, if you listen to me preaching, you've heard me say this word quite a bit, the word congruence. And congruence in the dictionary is agreement or harmony. It's in geometry, it's figures that have that are identical in form, coinciding exactly when superimposed. Like with two triangles are congruent if you put them over each other and they overlap perfectly. And that's the way we're designed as human beings to be with our inside and our outside. Our outside is supposed to match our inside. And I've also told this story often recently throughout this pandemic, and even said it in my sermon not too long ago, 1 or 2 weeks ago. But I'll tell it again because it fits. And the question for us today is, does your inside match your outside? I had a fight with my family. I was super angry, and I went outside and to go for a walk and put my AirPods in and to listen to worship music. And I stood at my gate, and we live in downtown Seattle and Capitol Hill, and we're in a gated community, and when outside the gate across from us is a methadone clinic, and the public bus stop is right by our gate, and so there's often addicts standing there. But this time, in my anger, there was maybe 15, 20, I don't know, it probably grew in my mind how many were there. And in my anger, I looked at them before I walked out the gate and just thought, why are you standing here? You're ruining my neighborhood. And in that moment, I stopped myself. My eyes got real big. And I thought, oh no, I've become what I don't want to be. And I realized that my inside and my outside weren't matching. And I talked to my counselor about it. My counselor said, your frustration is that these addicts that you were looking at, although unhealthy, are more congruent than you are. Because their inside and their outside look the same. And my inside's not far off from where their inside is, but I can fake it on the outside. And so we've been talking for months now about this idea of congruence and matching my inside with my outside. And another question to help you figure out whether your inside and your outside match is, do you see yourself the way God sees you? Now, almost none of us do. And we do maybe in moments and seasons, but we don't live like we see ourselves the way God sees us, which is the other question. Do you live like God is actually for you? See, matching our inside and our outside is understanding that there's nothing we could do more, there's nothing we could do good that will love us, that will make God love us more, and there's nothing we can do bad that will make God love us less. He just loves us exactly the way we are. And he's loved us like that at every age. He loved us when we were in the midst of doing things we shouldn't be doing at all, the opposite of the things we were supposed to do. He loves us now, and he just doesn't love us any different. And he's always for you, and he's always with you. And that's part of the story of Joseph in Genesis. He's a person throughout his story where the phrase follows him, and Adonai was with him. And it's true about me, and it's also true about you. He's with you. But do we live like he's with us? Do we live like he's actually for you? I was reading recently in a Eugene Peterson book, was Eugene Peterson translated, did the Message version of the Bible, but also has several books on being a pastor. And there's a book called As Kingfishers Catch Fire, which is 49 of his sermons. And he said this: the Christian life is the lifelong practice of attending to the details of congruence. Congruence between ends and means, congruence between what we do and the way we do it, congruence between what is written in Scripture and our living out what is written. Congruence between a ship and its prow, congruence between preaching and living, congruence between the sermon and what is lived in both preacher and congregation. The congruence of the Word made flesh in Jesus with what is lived in our flesh. So for me, in simple terms, the word congruence simply means what we believe is equal to how we live. And it's hard to do. It's not an easy thing to do. But I love that Eugene Peterson says we want to be what is in the Scripture. We want it to be equal to living out what is actually written. And if Yeshua is the Word in flesh, then we want to live that in our flesh. And I realized over the course of this pandemic, I've thought about this for many months now, and I've said it to many people in conversation. One of the problems in our culture is everybody wants secret things. And secret things sell. Mysteries sell. If I say to you, I know something and I've learned something that no one else knows, you're probably going to listen, and you're probably going to read that book, and you're probably going to watch that show, because everybody wants to know the secret things. But the secret things are a distraction from the things that are already revealed. I'll show you in Deuteronomy chapter 29 and verse 28. God says to Moses, the secret things belong to the Lord our God, but the things revealed belong to us and our children in order to do all the words of this Torah. The secret things belong to the Lord. Okay, one, if somebody tells you they know the secret that no one else knows, don't buy that product. Don't listen to that person. There is no great revealer of things that are secret and new things, because nothing's new under the sun. King Solomon wrote that a long time ago. But there are things that are revealed, and those things belong to us and to our children. But the problem is the secret things, or the striving for the secret things, distract us from doing the things that are already revealed, like loving each other, caring for one another, making sure that what we say we believe is equal to what we actually live. And it's given to us, the revealed things are given to us in order to do all the words of this Torah. In other words, he's given us everything we need to do the things he's asked us to do. But it is the distraction of the secret things that keep us from doing the things revealed. So Joseph in the book of Genesis is this amazing story of congruence. And the story of congruence for Joseph begins at 17, and near the end of the story is 20 years later when he's 37. And he is a prototype in Scripture for one who is just like our Messiah Yeshua, that the things Joseph does are archetype for what Yeshua becomes and what he does. But he learns over 20 years. I'm going to repeat that again. He learns over 20 years of his life how to make his inside and his outside match. And that's not just today, but that's over the course of this series on the life of Joseph. But I want to show you something amazing, and it has to do with the secret things and the revealed things and the life of Joseph. And that is, transformation is designed to follow revelation. When we're revealed something, when something is made known to us, what follows that is a transformation, because we have new information and now we can live with that new information. So the definition of revelation is a surprising and previously unknown fact, especially one that is made known in a dramatic way. The definition of the word transformation is two parts. It's a thorough or dramatic change in form or appearance. And two, it's a metamorphosis during the life cycle of an animal, the change that carries through. But transformation is designed to follow revelation. In other words, revelation equals new information. Transformation equals change based on that new information. The problem is there's a gap between revelation and transformation. And that gap always takes longer than we want it to. In fact, for Joseph, it takes about 20 years. Now, I'm finding, as I've been saying over the last few months, that some of these things actually for me started at 37, at 17, like Joseph, and I've always found that interesting in the story of Joseph. I said to one of my closest friends as I was processing counseling that I resonate with the story of Joseph because he has these dreams at 17, but the dreams don't actually come true till he's 37. And my friend said to me, there's only one difference, of course, between you and Joseph. Well, he was innocent. I told that to my counselor, and my counselor said, you need to keep that friend in your life. But there's a gap. And the gap between new information and change based on new information is always longer than we want it to be. Because you can understand an idea, something can be revealed to you and you can understand it. But in order to make changes based on that information, it takes a whole lot of time and a whole lot of attention and a whole lot of intentionality in the changes you're making based on that new information. And for Joseph, it takes 20 years. And we are confident when we get revelation through the process that it's going to happen. I mean, it's a revelation. It's going to happen. But we also have to realize that revelation doesn't cause the transformation with immediacy because things change over time. And that's why when we focus on the secret things that do not belong to us, meaning we will never know them. Could be, maybe you're right, you could be right. But of course we're not gonna know until, the secret things are revealed. And in doing that, we then miss the things that are actually revealed that are given to us by God so that we might actually change. So I want to talk about how Joseph, in this first message in this series, Inside and Outside, Congruence in the Life of Joseph, the first message is called Holy Addition and Subtraction. Or, I said it backwards. Oh, well, I made the slide backwards from how it is in my notes. Holy Addition and Subtraction. Check this out. Genesis chapter 30, verse 23. It says, Then she became pregnant, Rachel, and gave birth to a son. And she said, God has taken away my disgrace. And since she named him Joseph, saying, May Adonai add another son for me. And so in Hebrew, there's this explanation of where the word name Yosef comes from. And it's actually two different root words that one means take away and the other means to add. And they both contribute to Joseph's name. And the complexity of the story of Joseph in Genesis, it's summed up in this simple idea. Every time the Lord takes away, the Lord also adds to Joseph's life. But it's not an equation that means every time it takes away, the next second God adds. Nope, sometimes it takes 20 years for the add. But the addition can't come without the subtraction. And every time the Lord takes something away, the Lord also adds, which I'll say about this pandemic and all of the things that have changed and all of the things that are happening in our lives. Sometimes there's a holy addition and subtraction that happens in our lives. Now, the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Joseph and his 11 brothers, man, this is like the most dysfunctional family in the history of the world. That we like to look back because they're in our prayers, we worship the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. And these in our minds, and when we read, these guys are like superheroes. But when you read the details of the stories, they are so dysfunctional in every single way. It makes me think they would be great guests on Jerry Springer. Like he would love, also a Jewish guy, by the way, he would love to have all of them. And he would say things to them like, so your mother married who? And your kid, well, are you even the father of that child? Like all of those things would happen for the patriarchs, including Joseph. So it says in Genesis 37 that Jacob dwelled in the land where his father had sojourned, in the land of Canaan. And it's funny because in some translations, I love the way this plays out. It says, this is the genealogy of Jacob. Or it says, this is the story of Jacob. When Joseph was 17 years old, wait a minute. It says, this is the story of Jacob. When Joseph was 17, what happened to the story of Jacob? Well, the story of Jacob is also the story of his sons. And it's interesting that it shifts very quickly. This is the story of Jacob's family. Joseph was 17 years old when he was shepherding the flocks with his brothers, with the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. Jerry. Right? There's 4 women. They're all Gentiles. Rachel and Leah, who there's a crazy story of how Jacob got 2 wives that are sisters. Also, there's Bilhah and Zilpah because Rachel and Leah couldn't get pregnant. And Rachel and Leah couldn't get pregnant, so they used their concubines to have children for Jacob. And so Bilhah has kids and Zilpah has kids and Leah has kids, but Rachel, well, she can't have kids yet, except when she has Joseph. And she names him, the Lord has taken away, but the Lord will also add. So at 17 years old, Joseph brought back a bad report about his brothers to their father. Now, Israel loved Joseph more than all the other sons because he was the son of his old age. So he made him a long sleeve tunic, or some of you have seen the multicolored, the coat of many colors. And when his brothers saw that their father loved him more than all of his brothers, they hated him and could not speak to him in peace. This is true in so many families. When a parent obviously seems to love one of the children more, it makes sense that the other children hate him. Because these are people, and people have feelings and emotions that they don't know how to wrestle through. And so they hated their brother. So then Joseph dreamed a dream, and he told his brothers, and well, they hated him even more. And he said to them, well, could you just listen to my dream? I just want to tell you the dream that I dreamed. And he said, we were binding sheaves in the middle of the field, and all of a sudden my sheaf arose and stood upright, and behold, your sheaves gathered around and bowed down to my sheaf. Will you truly be a king over us? His brothers asked him. Like, Joseph is 17 years old, and he's like, guys, I had this crazy dream, and I think you're all going to bow down to me. Isn't that awesome? And the brothers, who we already know twice, it says they hated him already. At this point, they're like, okay, so that's your goal? Your goal is to rule over us? The youngest will rule over all the rest? And it makes them frustrated. They said, you're really going to rule over us? Will you? And so, well, they hated him even more because of his dreams and because of his words. But then he dreamed another dream. Man, this kid doesn't stop, right? He's like, guys, I had another dream. I don't understand why you're upset at me, but I had another dream. And he told it to his brother, saying, so I've just dreamed another dream, and suddenly there was the sun and the moon, and there were 11 stars bowing down to me. And it was awesome. And he told it to his father, as well as his brothers. And his father rebuked him and said to him, what is this dream you dreamed? Will it really come, your mother and I with your brothers, to bow down to the ground to you? Which is funny because Jacob is the younger brother of an older brother who wanted to be in charge and also did the same things. So his response is not just this, but then it also said, so his brothers were jealous of him, but his father kept these things in mind because he knew maybe it really was from the Lord. Jerry. Holy addition and subtraction. It's the idea that every time the Lord takes away, the Lord also adds. And when we have a revelation, there's new information. transformation is to change based on that new information. The difficulty is that there's usually a gap between those two. And in the scriptures, in the story of Joseph, it's a 20-year gap where Joseph understands the revelation that it turns out, and we'll discuss this over the next few weeks, but it turns out that his dream was from God. And it turns out that the things do work out the way they are supposed to work out according to the dreams that the Lord gave him. And not all dreams are from the Lord, so just because you're dreaming doesn't mean it's from God. But in this case, it is, but it doesn't actually happen for another 20 years. And the craziest thing that's happened in those 20 years. Joseph's sold into slavery in Egypt. Then he's the servant of someone in Egypt who his wife tries to sleep with him, his boss, and he gets accused, says no, doesn't sleep with her. And she accuses him of trying to rape her and gets put in jail for several years. He has dreams in jail, and he translates those dreams. And everything there's like these things that are taken away, but then there's also these things that are added, and there's always gaps. But all through, it still says throughout the story of Joseph, and Adonai was with him. It makes me think, his relationship to his brothers made me think about Matthew chapter 7. In Matthew chapter 7, Yeshua says, "Stop judging that you may not be judged. For with judgment you judge, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but do not notice the beam in your own eye? Or how will you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' and look, the beam is actually in your own eye?" Yeshua says, "You hypocrite. First take the beam out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." Then he says, "Do not give what is holy to dogs, or throw your pearls before pigs. Otherwise, they will trample them under your feet and turn and rip you to shreds." And this is Joseph's problem. This is part of the story of Joseph, is it's all about specks and beams. It's all about addition and subtraction. See, the brothers couldn't see because they had their beam of jealousy in their own eye, that they couldn't see what God was doing through their little brother. But they also couldn't see, because of the dysfunction of this family, that they all had an inheritance, but the inheritance was all messed up because he married 2 women and used their concubines to have kids. And now the 12 tribes of Israel are not only from 4 Gentile women, but there was all this strife between the fathers of the 12 tribes of Israel because they're human beings. And there's jealousy, and there's envy, and there's division, and there's strife, and there's all of these things. And everybody can see the beam coming out of everyone else's eye. I know what your problem is, and you probably know what my problem is. But we are the last ones to see the giant beam. Makes me think of Pinocchio's nose. When he lies, his nose grows, except we can't actually see it. Everybody else can. And to other people, the beams are obvious. Their beams are obvious. And I think what Yeshua is actually saying is, you have this beam coming out of your eye, but you think it's a speck. It's a much bigger problem than you realize. But for everyone else, it's sticking way outside of your eye. And everybody's like, "What's that sticking out of his eye?" And you're like, "There's nothing there. I don't even see it." And it's the same problem we all have. My encouragement to you is, if you can deal with the beam in your own eye, and first admit that it's a beam at all, then you'll be able to deal with it. One of my heroes, Mr. Rogers, says it this way: whatever is mentionable is manageable. If you don't talk about it and you just ignore it and it just keeps making you angry and you don't want to deal with those things, it will never be manageable. But if something can be mentionable, then it can be manageable. And when you come to terms with the beam that's sticking out of your own eye, then you will have a revelation, which will seem like new information, which everybody around you already knows. And transformation can happen, which is a change based on that new information. But the transformation takes a long time. Because the things that we have always done and the ways we have always thought and the ways we see ourselves and the way we think God sees us and the way our parents saw us and the way our friends see us and the way we present only what we're able to present to people about us, but most of our inner thoughts and our inner heart and the things that really matter aren't expressed because we're distracted by the secret things. I have people as a rabbi ask me all kinds of questions. And when I go to meet with different people and I'm always in a group and people find out I'm a rabbi, they go, oh, you must know a lot then. You got to tell us. And somebody inevitably will say to me, what do you think about the sevens in the Bible? What do you think about the this in the Bible? What do you think about this? Like I saw a video that said, and my answer is almost always, those things are probably true. I mean, I know some of those things are true. But how does knowing those things make you a better follower of Yeshua? Are you knowing them just to know them? Or are you using the secret things as a distraction from the things that actually God is trying to do in your heart and mind? It's back to Deuteronomy 29 and verse 28. The secret things belong to the Lord our God. Even with like eschatology, the end times, theology, right? People speak with so much certainty about what's going to happen based on a text that we do not understand. It doesn't mean you can't understand, and it doesn't mean you don't keep reading it in order to understand. But I had a professor say to me in college 25 years ago that the second coming is going to be a lot like the first coming of Yeshua. In the sense that when he actually comes, there will be people who say, well, it can't be you because you were supposed to do it this way. And he's going to say, yeah, but I didn't. And there's going to be tests that we have to test with to make sure that he is who he says he is, just like in the first coming. And there will be some people who are determined that he is not who he is because it doesn't agree with the way they understood information. But yet, he still is who he is. And it'll be true in the second coming too. And I think everybody will be wrong about something. Some of us might be right about some things. But there's not one person that when Yeshua comes back for his people that he's going to say, guys, well, I just want to recognize in this moment that I promised to my people thousands of years ago that everybody got it wrong except Ted from St. Louis. That guy knew what was up and you should have listened to him. I don't actually know a Ted in St. Louis, so if you're watching from St. Louis and your name is Ted, I'm sorry. I wasn't actually talking about you. It's like the end of a movie where it says the characters are fictional and not based on real people. The point is, the secret things belong to the Lord our God. But the things revealed belong to us and to our children forever in order to do all the words that are in this Torah. What we want in our lives, what I want for you, and I know what some of you desperately want in your inner being, and maybe aren't even aware, is congruence. We want the congruence in the things revealed, not the distractions of the secret things. And it doesn't mean the secret things are bad, and it doesn't mean they're wrong. I have a ton of fun with theology and eschatology. It's what I do. I read all kinds of random things about the scripture all the time, and I find them incredibly interesting, and I love to sit down and talk about those things with other people. But if it doesn't make me a better husband, and if it doesn't make me a better father, and if it doesn't make me a better rabbi or a better leader of people, if there isn't revelation that is causing transformation in my life, if I'm not using information to actually change something that matters, then it's a distraction. And it's what Yeshua says in Matthew chapter 7 and verse 7. At the end of all the things he says about the judging and not judging other people and the speck in your brother's eye and the beam that's coming out of your eye and how to be aware of the beam so that you can deal with your own beam. And when you deal with the beam, then you'll be able to deal with what is the speck in your neighbor's eye, which is a beam to them. Matthew 7 and verse 7, Yeshua says, so, ask, and it shall be given. Seek, and you shall find. and it shall be opened to you. Verse 8, he says, for everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, it will be opened. That, my friends, is holy addition and subtraction. Because the truth is, every time the Lord takes away, the Lord also is willing to add. The frustration is sometimes there's a gap, and we wait and we cry out, and we should cry out. But we say, why are you doing this to me? And why is these things not working out? And why are all these things happening to me? And what God is trying to do in your life is bring you to a place of congruence, where what we believe is equal to how we actually live. Does your inside match your outside? The simple answer is no. Can it? Yes. And it's probably going to take a long time and a bunch of intentional work to even try to figure out what doesn't match. But I'll give you this. Do you see yourself the way God sees you? I know before I did counseling for the last 2.5 years, I didn't. I saw myself in all kinds of ways back to my childhood that God has never seen me in before. I saw myself as a monster who didn't deserve anything good, and that has carried into my 40s. And it turns out I was never a monster, and God never viewed me that way. And that's me, but also for you, there are ways that you view yourself. There are things that you call your personality. There are things that you think are what make you who you are that are actually the opposite of how God sees you. And if you want congruence in your life, you're gonna have to line things up with how God sees you, not the way you've defined yourself. And the way we can do that is to ask this question. Do you live like God is for you? Or do you live like he's against you? Do you think he's coming after you? Do you think he's disappointed with you? Do you think he thinks you're awful because, or maybe he just has to love you because really you are awful? And if you knew how awful you really were, then he wouldn't be with you. But that's not how the scriptures talk about you, and that's not how God feels about you. God is on your side. Like Joseph, the Lord is with you. That's where we're going to head next week in the second message of this series, where we talk about this. Part 1 is holy addition and subtraction. Part 2 is called getting the Shechem kicked out of you. Shechem is a town in Israel, and it's where we came into the promised land from the wilderness between these two mountains. And the city of Shechem has all kinds of terrible and awful things that happened to the Jewish people in that place and to our forefathers, but it's also where they end up being buried. And there's all kinds of things that God wants to work out in you to lead you to a place of congruence. So that's going to be next week. I hope you come back and watch with us as we continue to learn about what it means to have our inside and our outside match together. See you next time.